I am advocating for a very different mindset to react to this new world that we live in.
We just need to pause and take time to be really introspective.
Let's embed more time for connection. That's what we all need.
I love it. That's a mic drop moment right there.
Well, welcome to Climbing the Corporate Ladder Without Breaking a Heel. I'm your host and your coach, Dr. Cynthia. With over 30 years in the corporate world as a single mom, cancer survivor, and often the only woman in the C-suite, I understand the balancing act high-achieving women face. Now an executive coach and international speaker, my mission is to embolden every woman in the C-suite or on the rise to claim her agency and challenge the norms holding her back. Tailored for ambitious professional women, this show offers candid conversations with powerful business leaders sharing their real stories of success and failure. If you're ready to look up and step up, you're in the right place. Join us right now as we invest in your future today.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Climbing the Corporate Ladder Without Breaking a Heel. I'm your host and coach, Dr. Cynthia. Before we jump in, I want to let you know that we have a really special offer for friends of the show. That's you. My new book, Human Capital Investment Strategy, is in pre-sale right now. And for you listening, you can pick up a copy in pre-sale for $3 off the retail price by putting in code CCL for Climbing the Corporate Ladder, CCL25. Go to my website, CynthiaBentzen-Mercer.com. Go to books and put in code CCL, pick up your copy early for only $25 and receive $728 in free content right out of the gate. Let's start working on your strategy today. Now let's jump into our guest. I'm so excited for today's guest. She's somebody I've been following now for a couple of years. We met at a connection opportunity, and today we have Dr. Michelle Johnston. She is recognized as a Woman of the Year, a top 10 executive coach, a top 500 business thinker, and she's passionate about connection-driven leadership, which we're going to jump into. She's an executive coach, a global speaker, a podcast host, and a distinguished professor at Loyola University, New Orleans. Her first book was a bestseller, not surprising at all, The Seismic Shift in Leadership, How to Thrive in a New Era of Connection. And her new book, which is coming out any moment, is The Seismic Shift in You. So we're going to jump in and learn all about the seismic shift in leadership and in you. And Michelle, thank you so much for being here. So excited to have you.
Oh, Cynthia, I'm so happy to be here. Yeah, to all of your listeners, Cynthia and I just bonded a couple years ago at this meeting, and I have loved watching your success and your messaging and your content. It's also valuable. So thank you for having me on your show.
Absolutely. And yeah, fangirling right here, right now. So I'm excited to talk about your new book. Now, it comes on the heels of an incredible book around leadership and the seismic shift. Maybe start with just the notion of the seismic shift itself. Where did that concept come from, and how has that been sort of foundational to the work you've been doing?
Yeah, great question. So years ago, probably around 2018, I was working on my first book, because as an executive coach, I was looking around and realizing that the old way of leading was no longer working. And I had been brought up with the leader as kind of the authoritarian, drill sergeant, command and control, just say what I do. Your paycheck is your reward, and that I wouldn't say necessarily was effective, but it was definitely in vogue. And that's
right.
and then all of a sudden the seismic shift, and that's why I named that book, was I looked around and I saw the leaders who were effective had a very different leadership style than the old ones. So I decided it was like a lightning bolt hit me, and I said, oh my gosh, I have to document and get this out. So my first book, The Seismic Shift in Leadership, was more diagnostic, saying, hey, everybody, holy smokes, this is not working. And I didn't really know what it was. I just knew it was connection that was working. But as somebody sitting on the front lines, what I knew to do, and as a trained researcher like you, I said, okay, I don't really understand. I just know what's not working. I don't really understand exactly what to do. So I'm going to interview the leaders that I see who are thriving, the leaders that I see who are failing, and we'll figure it out together. So that first book, I was able to say, I know that the seismic shift in leadership is one of connection. Here are some stories of leaders who are doing it well, who are not doing it so well, the good and the bad and the ugly, and it ended there. So then I am in London 2 Novembers ago at the Thinkers 50 Awards, and Marshall Goldsmith, who is my mentor, I'm there with him, and we're in our gala. He's in his tuxedo with his wife. I'm in my ball gown, and
Right.
we just listened to all the top thinkers in the world. And it was so obvious to me that they were all talking about AI and automation, and at the same time saying we need to lean in and go much deeper with heart and humanity. That as leaders, in order to succeed with this new AI world, we have to do it differently. And I said, Marshall, we need to write a book about this. There's the book. And that's another seismic shift. Would you be my co-author? And he said, yes. So that's why we wrote the seismic shift in you in order to address how in the world it's still more leaders, right? But this is also applicable to your daily life. How we show up, we need to show up differently in light of everything that we're facing with automation and AI.
Yeah, gosh, which is so, I mean, there's so much to unpack there. I'm curious, and I definitely want to dig into the seismic shift in you as well, but I'm so curious. You mentioned 2018 and then the leadership. How much did that continue to change and reinforce, right, some of your theory with COVID and then kind of working from home and all of, I mean, that was a seismic shift as well. How did that show up? Because that was a really interesting collision of time.
Great question, Cynthia. I truly believe, and we had just talked about that before we started recording, in the power of intuition. And I had finished the book and completed the book, and it was ready to launch in March of 2020.
Oh my gosh.
And now we are all in lockdown.
Yeah.
And I called my publisher and I said, I just wrote a book on connection, and nobody on this planet Earth right now can connect.
Right.
Unless it's with your nuclear family. I said, can you trust me on this? I said, if we release the book now, it's just nobody's reading. It's going nowhere. Give me actually, I didn't know it would be 2 years. I thought it'd be a couple months. I said, give me a couple of months while we're in this pandemic and let me go back and let me interview again some of these top leaders and figure out how to connect when we're disconnected. Thank goodness I listened to my intuition, because we did that. And most publishers would say, no, we need to get the book out to try to make money, but they listened, thank goodness. 2 years later, then I had a very different book, because I had incredible insights of how in the world we need to connect in more of a disconnected world. So we launched it in February of 2022. And Cynthia, I truly believe that is why it became a bestseller, because of timing.
Yes.
It was the right time when we were all going back to a semi-normal way of living and trying to figure out, how do you connect on Zoom? How do you connect in hybrid? How do you connect differently than anything we've ever known? And thank goodness I had some answers. So I'm very grateful.
Yeah, I don't want to overshadow the fact that when you mention intuition, because I think the woman listening needs to be reminded to listen to our gut. I find that for me, and I've talked about this on other shows, that I got so wrapped up in corporate that I felt like I needed to approach everything from a mind perspective, from an intellect perspective, from a data and evidence perspective, because in my mind that was how I was going to be taken more seriously in a male-dominated, environment. And I think, if I'm being honest, I lost a little bit of that connection with my intuition and that gut instinct, right? And so I love the fact that we do have such a natural gift, And sometimes we just need to pause and take time to be really introspective. So congratulations, because great,
you.
great call, and good for you for listening. What was the biggest bridge when you think about how do you still create connection? Because today people are still talking about trying to get people back in the workplace, and that is such a divide right now, especially as we see the impact on women, and who finally got a taste of being able to manage everything by not having a commute. Is it your belief that you can have connectivity virtually and in this more global world?
So here's where I feel about that issue right now is, and I agree with you, Cynthia, that by going to a hybrid model, it really allowed women to thrive for the very first time. That they, like you said, I don't know if they managed to do it all, but at least they felt like they could go and work and then go to a little league game. I was listening to a really powerful woman who in New Orleans, where I live, who now sits mostly on boards because she had reached the pinnacle of, a high level executive. And she's probably in her maybe late 60s. And she gave a presentation. She said, I am sad to tell you that when I was coming up, I had to say that I had doctor's appointments anytime I wanted to go see a kid's play or leave after school to watch a soccer game. She said, I am so grateful that women now can be honest, and we have and not just women, but the men too. I mean, this is not just this is a parent issue. And this hybrid does allow you flexibility. Now, there are CEOs out there who are saying the only way we're going to have creativity and connection is being back in the work 5 days a week. I do disagree. Yeah. I have found that productivity, in the research that I've read, productivity does not go down. That flexibility absolutely is what's going to attract particularly the Gen Zers.
Right.
The people who are the younger people, I teach those Gen Zers, I teach leadership at Loyola, and they're telling me that of course they want to be in the office and learn from the veterans. Of course they do. And they want flexibility. I can tell you my 21-year-old daughter, when she was offered 3 different internships this past summer, she went with the one that offered the most flexibility. And she worked and she got her work done. It's just a different mentality. So the younger people, even though some people say we need them in the office to learn, yes, and flexibility is, so I don't agree that we need to go back 5 days a week for connection. I do think we're figuring out, I will share with you, I have as I'm sure you do, Cynthia, I have a bunch of clients who are high tech, and in those high tech companies, they're all remote. And let me tell you how they have figured this out, and it's beautiful. This is the secret sauce. If you're fully remote, we do now know, the research shows that as humans, we need connection,
right,
to be at our best. We know that. So quarterly, these companies are investing in their teams, and quarterly they're spending 3 days at an offsite. And then they go back, and then for 3 months they're on Zoom or Meet or whatever, right? And then Teams, and then they go back. That seems to be a model that is working. So that leads to the reason why I wrote this book, is because I finally figured out the answer. And just like I had seen as an executive coach on the front line that old authoritarian jerk boss was no longer working, now I realize, after coaching so many leaders that are working so much by Zoom and not getting a whole lot of connection, what I'm seeing is weight gain. I'm seeing anxiety and depression. I'm seeing not great relationships at home or with the workers, and falling into that old trap of the perspective of just task, transaction, and missing out on connection. So this whole book has 7 steps to help you lead with connection, and it tells you exactly how to do it. So this is the how-to. The first one was diagnostic. There's a problem. You can't be a jerk boss anymore. We have to lean in with connection. Here are some stories about how some people are doing it. This one is, I've got to figure it out. And it is going to require an entire shift in thinking. that I'll give you an example. When I was home over the holidays, my daughter was home from college. And I always say that my number one priority is her. I always say that, right? Always. And 2 weeks into the college, the holiday, and she was home for 2 weeks, she goes, Mom, how can I be your first priority if I've barely seen you for 2 weeks? And I realized because I didn't shift when she got home, my whole mindset to make it her a priority. And I was just going about my business and my calendar was full of tasks. My orientation was tasks and I missed my most important priorities. So one of the most important shifts is you got to look at the priorities as your relationships and who are your most important relationships personally and professionally. And then look at your calendar and you better make sure your calendar reflects that. And I'm not seeing a lot of that today.
Right.
And so people are spending 10 hours in their chair and wondering why they're so miserable because they haven't prioritized connection. They haven't prioritized relationships. So the world has changed and we now need to pivot.
Yeah, gosh, there's so much to unpack there. First of all, I think for the person listening, I agree with you. I think this notion that everybody should be back, full time. Now, some work is not transportable, right? A bedside nurse needs to be at the bedside. But there is a lot of work that either all or portions of can be done in lots of places. So I think, probably there's many people listening that are saying, thank goodness this expert on connection still feels like there's a place for hybrid, remote, etc. I was thinking you and I have we met initially in person, but we've fostered and developed a relationship virtually. I have another gal that I met through executive coaching certification, and we're like the best of friends. I've never met her in person. So, it is a different world. You made me think of a really quick story when you talked about your daughter and the prioritization of relationships. I have a grandson, Ledger, who's going to be 12 in November. And every year for his birthday, we plan a CC Ledger trip together. And so we had a little trip planned, just a 3-day thing, he and I. And one of the nights before we had left, we were here at the house and he wanted to watch this movie. It was a Happy Gilmore or something. I don't know. It was something silly. And I was watching, sort of, and scrolling. And he'd say, oh, Cece, this is the best part. This happens. And, oh, Cece, this is such a good part. This happens. And I thought, I was getting kind of annoyed. Like, why do you keep telling me? Like, I'm sitting here. And then it dawned on me, I wasn't present, right? He kept interrupting me because I was on my phone. And I thought, either be on your phone or be with Ledger, right? This is that prioritize the relationship. I've got him for 3 days. I'm embarrassed to even admit that because, literally this was 6 months ago. But it was just another one of those moments where when you think about connectivity also has to do with being present, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And making, it's not just sitting there or that you were in the same house with your daughter for 2 weeks.
Right.
It's being present with your daughter.
Correct. That's exactly right. And that's when I had that epiphany that so many leaders, their calendars are just full of tasks, but their calendars don't reflect their most important relationships. And the days are gone when you were your professional self at work and then your personal self at home. You have one person, one life, one day at a time, one calendar to show up personally and professionally. And so we've got to shift our calendar management. We've got to, so that it reflects the most important priorities and the most important people. I coach a really fabulous CEO of a hospital system, and he said, Michelle, he said, when I think about my day, I really don't think about tasks. I think about who are the most important people that I need to meet today in order to accomplish our goals. He said, so it's not just goal, accomplishment, task. It's who are the people that I really need to spend time with, quality time with? Okay, so there's the prioritization, focusing on relationships, personally and professionally, making sure that your calendar is reflecting that. And then something that you mentioned with your example with your grandson about being present. So the way we run our meetings has to change as well. We no longer can just hop on a Zoom and say, up, 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 agenda. Here's, okay, see you later, bye. If this is how we're going to be communicating mostly on virtual, on Zoom or virtually, then we need to truly figure out how to have reciprocity and how to have a true connected conversation and give and take and get to know the person on the other end of the camera as a human. That's seriously what this whole book is rehumanizing the workplace. And the only way we're going to rehumanize workplaces is if it starts with ourselves and we shift our mindset to connection, then we can rehumanize workplaces. And again, even saying rehumanize workplaces makes it sound like we all have a place that we go to every day. And that's not necessarily, you and I work out of our homes.
Right.
We don't have this place. So we have to be so much more intentional when we show up. Like for the listeners, Cynthia and I probably spent, almost 15 minutes catching up. And that was not something that we embedded into our time together, catching up. How are you? What's been going on? Oh, I've seen this. And before we dive into business, because that's how you build trust. That's how you build those relationships where then you can conduct the business and then the business is valuable. The decisions are better. The results are better. So it is I am advocating for a very different mindset to react to this new world that we live in.
Yeah, I think that's so important. One of the things I really want to put a fine point on for the woman listening, because we touch on this in Now Near Next as well, which is be intentional about when and where you show up, which is exactly where you're headed. And I've been learning a lot about this too, as I've had some very brilliant guests. This intentionality about the relationships, right? We can also spend so much time with the person that we're trying to compete with, turn their thoughts around. I mean, I think we exhaust lots of energy on the wrong relationships at time, probably at home and at work, right? Both places. But for the women listening, I think one of the things that I want to emphasize that Michelle is saying is, whether you work from home or you're hybrid or you're in the office, how are you being very intentional about the right relationships that are a priority that you need to invest in? And at least one of those relationships, I would argue, should be a person of influence that has some say-so over your success, your aspirations, your next, rather than spending so much time in the weeds. Is how are you inviting somebody to coffee, virtual or otherwise, leaning into networking so that you're building new and expanded relationships and putting a priority around investing in yourself through connection and through relationships.
It's no surprise that you're an award-winning professional. You asked really good questions. So in order to have this relationship first mindset, this connection first mindset in how we run our calendar, in how we run our meetings, and how we have our conversations, the words that we choose, the energy, right? First and foremost is I had Gary Ridge on my podcast recently. He's the outgoing CEO of WD-40, and he did a phenomenal job of leading with that people first mentality, right? So you got to have that perspective first. And then when you look at prioritization, if you're not your first priority, then nothing else really matters. And that's what I shared with your listeners. What I have seen is that some of my leaders who I coach, who truly believe that they're doing the right thing by putting everybody else first. Right. And those are the ones who have gained weight, who are their relationships are suffering, and they're not very happy. And I say, have you taken lunch today? No, I had a meeting. Do you prioritize eating dinner with your family? No, I'm always on work calls. Are you working out? No, I don't have time. Have you taken a vacation? No, I don't have time. You know what? You're burned out. And we've got to figure out how you can prioritize you, because you're not at your best right now.
Right. Right.
And women really struggle with this, particularly to all of the females listening here. If you are in the mom years where you are working and you have young children and you have a husband or you don't have a husband, it is hard.
It is.
Right?
It
It is
is.
just hard. And you're not going to be the best mom and the best worker, and if you have a husband, the best wife, if you don't figure out how to prioritize yourself. So
Yeah.
that shift number 2 of prioritization when it comes to connection is connect with yourself first. I remember I had a coaching call with this guy. He is so brilliant. He was in information technology, and he said, I said, what looks different? This was during the pandemic. I said, what looks different with you? He goes, I finally got in shape. I said, how did you do it? We've been sitting at home in the pandemic. He said, I realized, and I had to sit my family down and tell them that sometimes I'm going to miss breakfast. Sometimes I'll miss lunch with you. Sometimes I'll miss dinner. But I've got to start running again because I'm freaking miserable and unhealthy. And I allowed this to happen, and it's not serving me well. So he explained the why really well to the family, that I might not be here at all the times where I typically am, but trust me, this is going to be better for all of us. And he said, Michelle, I've never felt better, because he finally put himself first.
Yeah. I have a client right now who has been working just around the clock for years and years, and the more she does, the more they layer on. And she is a workaholic, right? So she works a lot as part of her drive, but she has 2 young boys. She has a husband, and she was starting to feel like, I'm not there for anybody. My older son's going through this. My younger son's going through this. My husband feels like he never sees me. And I said, well, here's the thing. They're going to keep layering on until you have boundaries. And until you have boundaries where you can take care of you and make your family a priority, you're going to constantly feel that I don't show up 100% anywhere. You're just pulled at the seams. Talked to her recently, and she's been really committed to shutting down at a certain time, having family time, even if she has to pick back up at, say, 9:00 when the kiddos go down. I don't love the fact that she has to pick back up at 9:00, but at the same time, she's created that space, and it has given her so much more peace, because now she feels like she's showing up at home as well. So I think that showing up for yourself is critical, 100%. You mentioned 7 steps. I feel like we've hit 2 or 3 of them. Share more.
So those 7 steps, the first step is to shift your perspective to be a connection first perspective, rather than just accomplish, look at all I've gotten done, and not focus on relationships. So it's a connection first perspective. The second shift is your prioritization, and you have to come first. The third shift is calendar. And your calendar has to reflect what's really important. So it has to reflect you. Where are you working out? Where are you eating? Where are you getting up and having a bio break? Where are you on this calendar? The fourth one is shift your meetings so that they're much more connection driven. You begin with a connection question. You go deep with getting to know each other's full stories. I'm coaching a guy, big executive out in California of a big hospital system. He's brand new to the job. And I said, you will be loved if you begin every single meeting when you're just meeting these people and say, I don't want to tell you anything about me. I want to get to know about you. Tell me your story. And so it's having those connected meetings that are much more about, I don't know you and I need to get to know you. I'll give you another example. I have a new dean in the College of Business at Loyola. He's a business person, not an academic, which is a rarity. He began the very first faculty meeting. He said, I don't want to know about, eventually I do, but right now I don't want to know about the articles you've published, the books you've written, your expertise, the classes you teach. He goes, I want you to come in with one slide and tell me about you.
Oh, I love it.
Cynthia, I didn't know this about my colleagues that I've worked with for 25 years, right? And so that's where we need to go deeper. So those meetings are incredibly important to show up and create meetings that are conversational. So then the fifth one is your conversations really need to be as I said before, reciprocal is, again, it goes back to my first book, that old model of talking at people. So many leaders think that if you come into my office, or on a Zoom, I need to solve your problem and I'm going to talk at you, right? And so I worked with my leadership students yesterday, and I think that I'm teaching the entire baseball team. It's hysterical. And
I love it.
at 5 o'clock at the end of each day with their baseball hats, they're wiped out, they're tired, and I'm putting them through role play exercises of showing up with empathy, of learning how to ask open-ended questions, right? Of being of having what I call, Michael Bungay Stanier calls it a keystone conversation, beginning any project with, how are you at your best? How am I at my best? When are you at your worst, and why? What about me? And what does it look like for us? So many people don't have conversations that build those trust because it's just transactional. What do we need to accomplish? Blah, blah, blah. Rather than, before we dive into that, I want to know you and your story. I want to know where you're from. And let me share with you how I can be a great partner in this team project. So that's conversations. And then the sixth one is choose your words, because there are words that can erode connection. There are words that can accelerate connection, and I go through all of that. And then the seventh shift is shift your energy, because your energy enters a Zoom room or a physical room way before you do. And if you're not embedding time on your calendar 5 or 10 minutes before the next meeting, and you're in charge of all these meetings, you are not showing up with good energy.
Right. You're barely showing up. Yeah.
You're showing up like, oh gosh, and
why are we here?
And why are we here? And am I in charge? And I haven't been able to use the restroom all day. Can I please get up? And that's no good. So again, it goes back so much of this to focusing on the relationship and calendar management.
Yes.
So that you
it's
prioritize yourself first.
Yeah, it's priority. So you raise another question for me. I'm thinking about the introvert. Right? I'm thinking about the person that isn't high relationship naturally, because I'm a big student of positive psychology and natural talent and so on. Like, I can't teach you to be a natural smiler. I can suggest it's a good idea and it makes people feel good. But if you're not, you're not. How do you address? I'm sure that it's come up with the person that says, well, I just don't really open up like that, or I prefer working from home because I'm not a big people person. That sucks my energy rather than fills my cup and charges my battery. It doesn't mean you get a pass.
Correct. And again, it's knowing yourself so that you can have a calendar that reflects when you work at your best. Is it in small groups? It is one-on-one? Does your calendar have time to just strategically think every day? That was one of the best pieces of advice that I got when I interviewed for my book. I said, how in the world do you connect with the organization? That was my question. And this particular leader said, well, your calendar reflects your priorities and what really matters. And he said, and I need to ask you this, Michelle. He said, when you coach my leaders, do you make sure that they're embedding time every single day to strategically think? I said, I don't think they are. They go from meeting to meeting to meeting. He goes, but that's why I'm paying them big bucks. And he said, you can't really be a productive leader if all you're doing are meetings after meetings. He said, so just make your meetings 30 minutes, 30 minutes, 30 minutes, and schedule time so that if you're an introvert, then you need to be alone. And you need not to be on all these Zooms with all these people, because that's not how you're going to get your job done. So you have to know who you are and then schedule your calendar to reflect how you work best.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I've admitted on this show, and I've admitted in many circles, I consider myself a competent extrovert. Somebody called me that one time. I was like, that is brilliant. I'm coining that. In that, give me a job, I'll hand out napkins, I'll hand out drinks, I'll hand out name tags, or I'm the speaker. If I have a purpose, a job, I'm happy and I mingle with the best of them. But throw me into a conference where I'm an only, right? Nobody else is there with me, and I'm meeting hundreds of people I don't know. I can do it, but it's not energy giving, right? I don't look forward to it. I'm always glad I went. So I'm I have a little special side of my heart for the person that says, well, all this connection stuff is kind of scary or it sounds daunting. So I appreciate your point, which is know yourself. Schedule yourself to make you a priority, which you mentioned, and then but you don't get a pass. Connection is still how we
Right.
get things done. And you have more chips in the bank, right? If I know you and I know a little bit about you, that you're a whole person, then if I get an email that I read as snarky or short or whatnot, that isn't necessarily the conclusion I jump to because I know Michelle and you're just in a hurry. But if I don't know you and I get an email or a note or something said, now suddenly I'm just taking that at face value. And that is not how you build deep, trusting relationships.
Boy, you said it beautifully. Yeah, it's very hard to judge when you know someone's story. And we as humans assume the worst unless we're given different information.
Yeah.
So that's on us to explain the why, right? I remember being on a Zoom for 8 hours during the pandemic on a search committee, and this very high level woman had her camera off the whole day, and none of us did, right? We didn't. I'm thinking, and she barely participated, no camera, and that is not how you need to have a Zoom, by the way, an 8 hour Zoom, right? It just,
Right.
they hadn't adapted yet to this new world of work. And at the very end, she finally puts in chat, I'd made these negative assumptions. What is she doing? Does she not care about us? Does she not care about the search? Is she not a valuable member of this team? What is she doing? At the very end of the day, she chatted, I am so sorry. I have the flu. I've been trying to keep up in between naps, but I wanted you to know I'm doing the best I can. That's why I'm not on camera. If she had said that in the very beginning, then we would have given her a pass, but we just didn't know and we assumed the worst. It's sad, but that's the human condition.
It is true. And I'm just going to put a plug because this was anybody that ever has worked with me over 30 years in the corporate world. I have always said, assume positive intent.
Yes.
That was a guiding principle of my leadership and my team. Assume positive intent, right? The minute you go like, what is her deal? It's maybe there's more to the story. My kids think I assume positive intent to a fault, by the way. They want to, they want to have a come apart about something, this person and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, honey, now you don't know. They could have had this going on. And they're like, Mom, can you just take our side?
That's sweet. And I agree. A lot of leaders have the tenet of assume positive intent. In all of my research on connection, I have learned that you really can't just assume positive intent and you can't just trust somebody unless you have embedded time to form those deep relationships. And you can't do that just talking about the weather and saying, hey, thanks for being on the Zoom. What do we have to accomplish? You have to spend time getting to know people. And that's what's different now. We've got to go deeper, and it's harder. And you have to take more time, but it will pay off. And then you can assume positive intent, and then you can trust somebody if they know their story.
Yeah, fair point. It's intentionality, isn't it? Which is the through line of both of my books, which is it's intentionality. Things just don't happen by happenstance. You have to be intentional about these connections, and you give this really great process. Are there in the new book that's coming out, are there some tools in terms of, I don't know, worksheets or tools about how to deepen connections? What can people look forward to?
So what I did is I interviewed the experts in each of these shifts. So, and then Marshall added his expertise. So again, shift the conversation. And so Michael Bungay Stanier, who wrote The Coaching Habit and talks about Keystone Conversation, he gives you the script. Alyssa Cohn has scripts. Alyssa Cohn wrote From Startup to Grown Up, and she has scripts for tough conversations. So then I include those scripts here. If you want to have a conversation that somebody's not pulling their weight, here's how to do it that actually accelerates connection and doesn't erode connection. Then I had Sam Horn, who is a true expert in the words you use versus the words you lose in order to build connection. So each chapter has either specific tips or framework or conversations or scripts so that you know how to do it.
I love that. I'm going to add one. So my thought partner on Now Near Next, Kimberly Rath, owns a behavioral science company, and they have a tool called Focus on You. And it's basically just 5 questions. You can use it at the beginning of a conference. You can use it at the beginning of a team meeting. It's the name you like to be called because, believe it or not, like over 60% of Americans are called by names that they don't really care for, like Cindy versus Cynthia, right? Things that you love to do, things you're good at, things you're proud of. So it's 5 questions. The magic in it is every person you take time to fill out yours. Each person, as they speak to it, they get uninterrupted 2 to 3 minutes to say their answers without questions or whatnot. Most of us never get 2 to 3 minutes of uninterrupted talking if we're married or have a significant other or children. And then people ask questions, but you can also jot down what the others say and the connections. I've done it with teams, same teams with new people coming in, and worked with somebody for 10 years, but every time we do it, they add a nuance in. It's like, oh, they just took up an herb garden. Who knew? But it gives you that commonality, those things that now we can talk about that in the tactical day-to-day you otherwise don't get.
Right.
So
that's right. It's knowing a person fully at a more human level and going deeper with connection and finding commonality. I mean, it sounds simple, but if it's so simple, why aren't more people doing it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really listening into this heart and humanity. And one of the things in my research, particularly in my new book, Human Capital Investment Strategy, is you're so onto the seismic shift around technology, because the other thing, and I know you know this, that we're seeing is with AI and automation and machine learning and all the things, the cognitive load, the tactical parts of what so many people do for a living are going to get taken care of, right? Bots and whatnot.
Yeah. So it actually gives us
so
more
what's
time
left
for connection.
Yeah. But we need to be intentional about that, because I think this fear about, oh my goodness, all of our jobs are going to go away. It's no, compassion and empathy and problem solving and conceptualization and taking things to the next level from a human perspective. That's what's left. And by the way, statistically, women show up with those qualities in spades. So what have long been soft skills, right, that were sort of like the soft skills, I think are going to be taking a front row seat going forward. And the sooner myself, others, the woman, the person listening taps into that and says, how do I really now invest deeply, more intentionally in these connection points, I think is going to just help them thrive as we move into this further into this digital era.
Oh, I completely agree with you, Cynthia. It's your new superpower. And this AI is just going to automate so much of stuff in our life. And we're going to have more free time. And if we then choose that free time to continue to stay in front of our phones and our computers, that's on us. And so we're going to realize that AI is going to free up a lot of free time, free up a lot of our time. And then we have to be intentional with, we at the end of the day, we're all going to be craving more and more connection, because so much of our world is going to be head buried in automation and technology, and we're going to be craving it. And then what happened after the pandemic is there was social inertia. People were like starting to melt into their chairs, right? And they're like, I don't want to go out. I don't want to go to a party. I don't want to go to the office. Thank goodness we're out of that now, and people are realizing, okay, wow, anxiety, depression, isolation are the consequences of not leaving your house. We need each other. Now automation is huge, and so let's embed more time for connection. That's what we all need.
I love it. That's a mic drop moment right there. One thing that the person listening should start doing, stop doing, and continue doing.
Yes. So start doing right now is try to, I would recommend, because we spend a lot of time on this, look at your calendar and make sure that it reflects your priorities. Stop prioritizing yourself last, right? Keep showing up in the world as a good, beautiful human with a heart.
I love it. I love it so much. Michelle, you're amazing as always. Where can people get a hold of you? Talk about when your book, Seismic Shift in You, is coming out and where folks can, I think they can pre-order now, correct?
It's on pre-order, so just go to Amazon, The Seismic Shift in You. It's pre-order right now, and then we're launching in London in November, and then the pub date is December the 2nd. So you'll have it in your hands on December the 3rd. So thank you so much, Cynthia, for your support. I love being with you, and thanks for all of your great questions.
Oh, thank you so much. And it sounds like a great Christmas gift, y'all. The Seismic Shift in You. So pre-order now. Make sure that you've got your copy on December 3rd, or certainly the week that it's published. It's an awesome Christmas gift or holiday gift for friends and loved ones. Share it with your teammates. We could all use a lot more connection these days. That wraps up this episode of Climbing the Corporate Ladder Without Breaking a Heel. Be good to yourself and remember to start investing in your future today.
That concludes today's episode of Climbing the Corporate Ladder Without Breaking a Heel with me, your coach and host, Dr. Cynthia. Congratulations on choosing to invest in yourself. I know your time is precious, so thank you for spending a little bit of it with me. I believe in helping you step forward, look up, and realize your full potential. So if today's episode resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you'd rate and comment on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you tuned in. And if you know someone who would benefit, please share this episode with them. Before you go, fuel your next step. Grab a copy of Now You're Next, or pre-order a copy of Human Capital Investment Strategy, both available online at Amazon. Let's stay connected. Visit me at CynthiaBentzen-Mercer.com or find me on all the social and follow me at Dr. Cynthia Bentzen-Mercer. Until next time, remember, boldly start working on your future today.